Bridget, Nee-Walsh, and Henry Santana have demonstrated their readiness to engage in civil discourse. It's my pleasure to begin by introducing our moderator, opinion writer at the Boston Globe, Abdallah Fayyad. Abdallah is a member of the Globe's editorial board. He previously worked for The Atlantic and covered the George Floyd protests in Washington, D.C. for DCist and WAMU. In 2022, he was named a Pulitzer Prize finalist for a series he wrote on reforming the American presidency. He has a degree in economics from American University. Abdallah, we are thrilled to welcome you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Carol, for inviting me, and thanks to the wards 4, 5, and 10 committees for hosting this event. And thank you to all the candidates who agreed to join today. Those candidates are, for those watching, the incumbent city councilors at large. Those include Ruthzee, Louijeune, Julia Mejia, Erin Murphy, and we have candidates, new candidates running for at large. That includes Clifton Braithwaite of Mattapan, Henry Santana of Dorchester, and Bridget Nee-Walsh of South Boston. So just to lay the ground rules for this evening, we're going to give candidates 1 minute to respond to questions. So you have a minute to respond to each of these questions. Some of them I'll ask a specific yes or no question. You don't have to fill the minute. You can just say yes or no. When it comes to rebuttals, if you are mentioned by one of your opponents and would like to rebut something that they said, you will have a 30-second response. We ask you all to please stick to the time limit because we have a lot of issues to cover today. We probably won't get to all of them. And the more we stick to the time, the more issues we can get through. So let's go ahead and get started. And just to start off, let's go around and give each candidate a 1 minute opening statement. Councillor Louijeune, I'll start with you. With your opening statement, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Abdallah, and thank you to Wards 4, 5, and 10 committee for putting on this forum. I'm Ruthzee Louijeune, at-large city councilor in my first term, 18 months in. Really excited and humbled to have the privilege of representing all 23 neighborhoods on the Boston City Council, to be the first Haitian American on the Boston City Council, and to really be centering the work of equity and collaboration. I started on the city council by putting in deep investments, working in community to put in deep investments to the Office of Returning Citizens so that we can give grants to organizations that are being led by folks who are formerly incarcerated, who are themselves doing the work of prevention and harm to correct for our past harms, doing the work of really caring for our new arrivals who are arriving every day in the city. My office has been leading on that from the beginning, calling for an end to Title 42, using my experience as a housing attorney to make sure that we are centering affordability in every conversation that we have. I have so much work left to do. It is an honor for me to be in this position to, as a BPS student, as a BPS graduate, think about how do we show up every day for our young kids and build a Boston that they deserve, which they can see their full potential really realized because we are investing in.
Thank you, Councillor Louijeune. Councillor Mejia. Is Councillor Mejia on? We'll go back to her. Let Councillor Murphy. Oh, there's Councillor Mejia. Let's go back.
That's right. Let's go back. I was having a little technical difficulties there. My apologies with my internet, but can you guys hear me and see me, please confirm?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm sorry, I'm using my my phone, but I'm going to switch over to my computer in a second, but I'll just do my intros. I am Councilor at Large Julia Mejia, super excited to be here. For those who know, in 2019, I became the first Afro-Latina ever elected on the council, and since then have been deeply committed to making sure that those who are living the realities and doing the work are centered in all decision-making policies, protocols, and procedures that my office has led. I'm so incredibly grateful that even though I have a growth mindset, in the last 3.5 years, our office has managed to produce 13 pieces of legislation and have led on issues of reparations, establishing a Black Men's Commission, really looking at residential kitchens and language access. So for me, all the work that I do is centered around making sure that we're bringing equity and opportunity to everyone here across the city of Boston. As the first person in my family to graduate high school, I'm really happy to chair the Education Committee, as well as Workforce Development, Labor and Economic Empowerment, and a new committee that I chaired and founded, which is Government Accountability, Transparency, and Accessibility. I would like to believe that the work.
Councilor Mejia, thank you so much. And just a note that we have a timer who will, mute you if you go over a minute. So please try to keep your answers to that 1 minute mark. Councilor Murphy.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for hosting tonight. Thank you to Wards 4, 5, and 10. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be back on the ballot, finishing up my first term. Definitely jumped right in and kept the promise I did throughout the campaign last time, showing up in every neighborhood, listening to people, collaborating, and getting work done. Some of the highlights of the work I've been doing on the council is standing up for families. As a Boston public school teacher for over 20 years, a student myself and a parent of BPS kids, former parent, know how critically important it is to stand up and advocate for all of our children across the city so everyone has access to quality schools. Also investing in workforce development, and as the chair of public health, homelessness, and recovery, and a strong background in advocating for the recovery world, making sure that we're investing and got a lot of funds invested through ARPA money and the budget to increase funding for mental health supports for our seniors, our children, and all of our residents across the city. I'll continue to show up to listen and looking forward to meeting.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Let's move on to Henry Santana.
All right. Thank you, Abdallah. And good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ward 5, Ward 4, and Ward 10 for having me here tonight. My name is Henry Santana, and I'm a proud Dominican immigrant who grew up in public housing in Mission Hill and have dedicated my career to giving back to the city that I love so deeply. Before I get started tonight, I do want to recognize and want to say that my heart is with the family and community of the 12-year-old child that we lost in Mattapan this afternoon due to gun violence. Gun violence has a destructive impact across our neighborhoods, especially in our Black and Brown communities. And as we grieve this tragedy together, we just want to acknowledge that and give space for that. I'm running for Boston City Council at large to really bring a new perspective to the council and to center community and center issues like public safety, affordable housing, and civic engagement and environmental justice. Thank you for having me tonight, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Henry. Bridget Nee-Walsh. Bridget is on mute. Bridget, can you try to unmute yourself? See if.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. There you go.
All right. Okay. My name is Bridget Nee-Walsh. I'm a single mom, a 17-year union iron worker with Local 7. I'm a small business owner. I'm running for Boston City Council at large. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My phone's saying all kinds of different things. It was good up until now, of course. I represent public safety, better schools. I'm the mom of a 7-year-old, and I raised my godson who's 16. They're both in Boston public schools. So I think we need safer schools, more equity in the schools. as a union worker, I've worked tirelessly to include and recruit more females and more minorities into the trades. When I started, I was like one of about 25 or 30 females. Today, we have over 150 in Local 7 alone. I'll take that same value with me to the city council. And I also advocate strongly for vocational schools and, teaching our children that there are other options than college available to them. I don't know if there's a timer on or what.
There is. You should be able to see it on your screen at some point. And sorry if you didn't, but there is a countdown clock for 1 minute. So try to look out for it. But you actually wrapped up just around 1 minute. So thank you for that. Last but not least, Clifton Braithwaite.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah. And folks in Ward 4, 5, and 10. My name is Clifton Braithwaite. I've been a longtime advocate, 3 decades in the community. I've worked from the private sector, community outreach, as well as for other candidates. And one thing about myself is that I'm committed to transparency, accountability, and integrity. That's what I will bring to the table. We need generations ahead of us to be prepared for the road, and it will be the council that will make the great decisions along with the mayor to bring a better Boston. Things that I will stand on: family stabilization, education, public safety, arts and performing arts space and living arrangements for artists, as well as expanding our housing equity and home ownership. And definitely coastal flooding in the Boston area is a major issue, and youth violence. And I'd like to thank Henry for mentioning the young man that just passed in Mattapan, because I did want to mention a moment of silence. But I'd like to thank the committees for having us on, and let's get right to the meat and potatoes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clifton. I appreciate it. Okay, so to get started, let's start with why you're all running in the race. Some of you have obviously addressed that, but let's talk about your priorities. Just to start off, can you tell me one or two things, one or two of your priorities that you would like to get done in the next session, should you be elected, or in some cases reelected to the city council? Councilor Mejia, I'll start with you. What are one or two of your priorities for the next term?
Thank you. I think that for me, what I'm really looking forward to doing in my 3rd term on the council is really building some infrastructure for real community engagement. I think we're working towards that, but I still hear out in these streets that things are being done to them without them. So really working alongside a number of different departments to really look at building infrastructure when it comes to development, when it comes to education. I think that we can do a better job in that space. And I'm really interested in looking at ways that we can also strengthen our ability to be more responsive to the needs of vulnerable populations. I like to say resilient populations. I think that we have a lot of people who are coming here and I'm not seeing the type of infrastructure in place to ensure that we're able to get people to apply for school, to get into good jobs. So I think that there's a lot of barriers that are still facing a lot of recent arrivals, and I'd like to be able to help support that, and obviously more workforce development.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Henry, what are one or two things that you'd like to get done should you be elected to the city council?
Yes, no, thank you, Abdallah. I think number one, I think housing, as someone who grew up here in the city of Boston and grew up a product of public housing, that really gave my family and me the opportunity to really not only stay here in the city of Boston, but thrive here in the city of Boston. And I want to make sure that more families, more youth, and everyone across the city is able to have and able to live here in the city of Boston if they wish to. And to that point, really want to be able to create more home ownership opportunities for people to really be able to thrive here in the city of Boston. The second issue that I really want to focus on is public safety. Again, as a product of public housing, and as a Black man here in the city of Boston, growing up here, I truly understand the dynamics that comes with public safety, and really want to make sure that we're investing in our youth, providing affordable summer programs and after school programs and other programs to really keep our youth engaged. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Councillor Murphy, what are some of your priorities?
Here we go. Hi, let me put my camera on. I pulled over. Thank you for that. I want to continue the work I've been focusing on children, making sure we have opportunities, equitable before and after school programming at all schools across the city, which also will support our working families, making sure that everyone feels that they have a voice at City Hall. One of the number one things our office does well, and definitely make sure we answer the call to constituent service calls. It can be a tree in front of their house, or it could be, a senior being displaced. So making sure that we are connecting the residents to the city of Boston. I feel like that is our number one job, to make the quality of life of all of the residents of the city of Boston equitable. And being an at-large city councilor around the city, knowing that when we're ribbon cutting parks over in West Roxbury at beautiful new Millennial Park, that we're also cleaning up Clifton Park and making sure every resident across the city has the same experience, if it's schools, if it's public safety, and definitely the connection of public health and public safety, and advancing more of the mental health supports across coming out of the pandemic, but continuing to support all of our residents, seniors with isolation, and students and working families, and always making sure, as a renter myself, that we continue to put all of the resources we can to make this city affordable for people to stay, and not just scrape by with spending all their
I'm just
money
going
on
to have
rent.
to cut you off there because we've
Sure, no worries.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Clifton, let's turn to you. Tell us just one or two of your top priorities, things that you'd hope to get done should you get elected to the council.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Number one top priority, family stabilization. Reason why I say that, you have mothers, fathers, veterans, and children. I believe, from seeing in my experience, the nucleus of the family should be taken care of first. Two, from my experience in school, great sports programs and great arts programs. But now that we're in the new millennium, definitely bringing STEM to another level. There was a time that our ORC at Madison was one of the greatest technical schools. I'd like to see that come back. And three, and most importantly, definitely youth violence and violence across the board. We should be able to feel safe to go to the corner store, to take a walk in the park, or just generally hang on the corner in front of your home. You should feel safe. We shouldn't have to worry about violence. So we would have to dig deep in and dive into that. But overall, it's just a sense of having our constituent services being able to address problems. And the best thing of all, and I like to leave on this note, is just be a great listener, because the only way you can improve people's lives if you take the time to listen to them. All of us candidates have an agenda, but the best agenda is really listening to the people.
Thank you. Councillor Louijeune, what are some of your priorities for your next term should you get reelected?
Thank you. Should I have the honor of getting reelected? Two things. One is on housing, continued investment in anti-displacement. And then two, our schools, ensuring that we have more loving adults in our school buildings for our kids. So one, on anti-displacement, the city has a great program called the Acquisition Opportunity Program that works alongside community land trusts and nonprofit developers to prevent displacement. Properties that are lived in by tenants that are otherwise would be sold on the open market to someone with a profit incentive. Instead of doing that, selling it to a nonprofit developer or community land trust that's subsidized by city dollars, to ensure that tenants are able to stay on the property and not have to move out of the city or not face rising rents with a new corporate entity. So making sure we are earmarking money for community land trusts. It's efforts that I've already led and that I will continue to lead. More loving adults in our schools, bringing down that guidance counselor to student ratio. Every guidance counselor you ask, how do we improve on the work that we're doing? We need to hire more guidance counselors. Our students are walking into our school buildings every day with trauma, with rising mental health issues, with phones that are telling them X and Y, Z thing to do. For me, my guidance counselor was transformative as the daughter of parents who did not go to college. Guidance counselors are not only responding to the social and emotional needs of our students, but also helping them think about career, whether that be college or the trades. We need more social workers, more loving adults, more nonprofit organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't mean to keep cutting you guys off. It's just we have a lot to get. But thank you. I appreciate it. And Bridget, what are some of your priorities? One or two?
All right, can you hear me? I shut the video off. I'm hoping this works.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, great. So public safety would be a huge priority for mine. Bringing police back into the neighborhoods, starting like, well, with teaching the youth that they can trust the police and that the police are, a safe, that the police are safe and trustworthy, and that, they're there to keep the harmony and keep the streets safe. Labor is huge with me, obviously, as a union iron worker, the infrastructure. So just to keep Boston building, to keep things moving, to have senior services and senior housing, so our seniors aren't getting pushed out of the city the older they get. Bring the vocations back into Boston. We still only have that one vocational school. People have talked about it for 20 years plus now. And I think kids really need another outlet, and to know that there are other options than going to college where they can still make a sustainable living to afford to stay in the city of Boston. And really just constituent services, having the average Joe be able to reach out to a city councilor and get things done, get potholes filled, get their sidewalk fixed and things of that sort.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you so much. So just before we move on, I just want to mention that our timer seems to have gotten disconnected on the screen. So sorry if you can't see it. I will try my best to keep time here. And sorry if I cut you off. I will give you a chance to finish your last sentence around a minute. But that's how we'll do it until the timer gets back. So for moving on, let's talk about Mayor Michelle Wu. She's been in office for just under 2 years. I'd like to ask some of you or all of you about, how would you evaluate her, how you would grade her job performance? And, if there's anything that you think she should be doing differently, and, what you would do on the council to advocate for that. So Henry, I think you should do the honors as a former, since she's your former boss. I think you should get to go first. So, how would you grade your former boss as mayor? And is there anything that you think that she should be doing differently? Sorry, you're on mute.
This is a loaded question.
Yeah, so thank you, Abdallah. I think, as you mentioned, I was a former director of civic organizing for the city of Boston under Mayor Michelle Wu's administration. And I resigned from that position at the end of April to fully focus on my campaign. The mayor, I think she is the first person of color to be elected to the city of Boston as mayor. And she leads very differently from any other mayor that we've had. She really empowers, her workforce and her employees to really be on the ground and really understand, what's really going on. I think she's done, a good job in making sure that, we're really trying to build coalitions of bringing everyone at the to the table. In terms of things that I think we can definitely improve. I think is, as mentioned on this call, is making sure, I think something that I really got to work on was participatory budgeting. And I think that's something that I believe in, and something that we should be able to expand.
Right, great, thank you. Bridget, how would you evaluate the mayor? Is there anything that you wish you would be doing differently, or anything that you would encourage her to do differently?
I think her new initiative about the children swimming lessons for children is beautiful. I mean, Boston essentially is a peninsula, and I think all children, that is such a, it's not playing the flute, it's not guitar and things of that sort, which I also think are very important. I have an arts background myself, but I think swimming is, a life learning essential. You need to learn how to swim to save your own life in the city of Boston. So I think that's great. The bike lanes, I'm like 50-50. The bike lanes, I think, are very detrimental to business in West Roxbury. I know different areas that they have been installed. The median between the bike lane and the street, the fire trucks are having issues with that. So I think things like that need to be kind of reevaluated. I think it's a good idea. It just needs to be implemented in a different way. but
Thank you,
that's
Bridget.
about
I'm
it.
gonna cut you off there, and note that we will be talking about some bike lanes soon. So hold on to that thought. Councillor Louijeune, how would you evaluate the mayor?
Hi, Al. Thanks for the question. So I think the mayor has been doing a good job so far. I think 20 months in office, there's still a lot to do and a lot to learn. I think I'm excited by the fact that even when we are talking about budget every year, we're trying to get better at making sure that this is the people's budget and that we are really calling in community to really have a say on the budget. I think that there are important strides being made on the crises that we face every day when it comes to the housing crisis, really not making sure that we are developing policies that aren't about centering developers, but really about centering what's best for the city and how we can both grow as a city and make sure that we are providing ways for our residents to stay here. So I'm excited about that. A Green New Deal for our Boston Public Schools is essential. I go back to my elementary school in Mattapan, and it looks the same as it did when I was there 25 years ago. So there's more. I'm excited about that and the potential for.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mejia, what are your thoughts?
I'm on mute. So, I have to say, as a woman of color who have had to learn so publicly my job, I have so much sympathy and empathy for Michelle Mayor Wu as she continues to navigate and showing up in a city that is so incredibly racist. And I'm going to keep it 100 because if anybody knows anything about me, that's what I do best. And I think that she has had to endure a lot. And I think under the circumstances that we find ourselves in, I think that the mayor has had to deal with bringing a city that has constantly been in constant conflict together around very pretentious issues across the city. So I think when it comes to that, I'm encouraged by her ability to really lean into difficulty and make decisions that sometimes are going to make people mad. I would also say, as a community organizer and an activist, I love to see a little bit more community engagement in certain neighborhoods. I think that we have an opportunity to grow. I'm incredibly encouraged by the diversity of her chief of her cabinet, and it really speaks volumes to what this moment is calling.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murphy, your thoughts on Mayor Wu's job performance?
Sure. I don't know why my video can't turn on, but I'm home now. So absolutely, thank you for the question. So I believe that Mayor Wu is doing a good job, but I do want to make it clear that I'm very also aware that my role as a Boston City Councilor is not we don't work for the mayor, and many times I get the on the ground concerns from residents that they have conflict or don't agree with all of the policies that the mayor's office is pushing through. And I do take it seriously to uplift those voices. So there are definitely times where I have gone against some of the initiatives the mayor has been pushing through. I do respect in the 2 years now with the budget, where she's really centered a lot of the investment around families and making the city a place for families and seniors and people to feel that it's a safe, welcoming place to live. And it's something I also advocate, and I'm working hard on my own policies to echo a lot of that. So I know that we're trying to figure out on the council.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Clifton, how would you evaluate the mayor? We can't hear you. Can you try maybe muting and unmuting yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Madam Mayor, dear friend of mine, I had the great opportunity to work with her on Elizabeth Warren's first run, and she gave me a lot of room for improvement and growth. Doing my community events, she came to every community event. And as mayor, I work for the constituents of the community. So I speak for the unheard voices. I would always have nothing but respect for the mayor, but I would have to worry about the constituents and bring more services to the community and have a great relationship. That's what building and being a counselor would be great for me, is relationships. And just like one of the counselors just said, you have to admire her learning on her toes and putting her hair back. And to be a great leader, you have to be a great listener. And I believe Madam Wu could be a great listener, but I would always be on top of my game to make sure my constituents get the services that they deserve.
Thank you. So let's move on to talking about the council's reputation. That's obviously been in the news lately. One of the current incumbents of sitting in an at-large seat, Councillor Flaherty, when he decided to not run for re-election, he spoke with my colleague, Joan Benaki, and told her that he would be remiss if he did not mention that the last term has been particularly tough. I believe he said that he used the word embarrassing at times. There has been a lot of rancor in the last term, and I want to ask some of you about what you think might help, improve collegiality in city council and in city hall, and what you think maybe the problems might be. So, Councillor Mejia, I want to start with you. In one of the redistricting hearings, you had talked about the disappointment you had in how your colleagues were conducting business. You referred to the process at times as, quote, funny business. You said that some funny business was going on. You added that the process was, quote, educating people about politicians and how we all are, because I think there's a lot of things happening here behind the scenes. You concluded that that is, quote, a reason why people can't trust our government. Can you expand on what you think is causing that credibility gap between the council and its constituents based on what you learned from that process?
Yes, I'm so happy that we are leaning into this conversation, because one of the reasons why I entered politics is because of my mistrust for government. And as I continue to navigate spaces, I have seen the many ways in which our constituents are not really seeing the behind the scenes and the wheeling and dealings that happen. I think that a lot of the tension that we see on the council is because we've been talking a lot of things about public safety, redistricting, budget. All of these things are incredibly charged. And I don't think that we have really utilized our platform as a way to educate people. So there's a lot of frustration that I see, not just in the council, but out in these streets. And so as someone who did not grow up in the political space per se, I think that for me, the last 3 years in government has really taught me a lot about why things don't move fast enough for our people. And oftentimes there is this tension. However, I see this as an opportunity. And because I have an award-winning personality, I am really looking forward to utilizing my award-winning personality to bring people together across the differences, because that is what this moment calls for. And that is what I'm really looking forward in doing, not just my 13 city council colleagues, but really bringing Black and Brown and people together across their political differences. And I think that that is the work that we have yet to do on the council. And that is the work that I'm looking forward to leading on the council, because I know.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murphy, a few months ago, in light of the Rachel Rollins report, you called on one of your colleagues, Ricardo Arroyo, to resign from the council. Do you still stand by that evaluation? And do you think that kind of call from a colleague is helpful to creating a good environment in City Hall? Do you think that's advancing the cause of a well-functioning city council, or do you think that's something you might want to leave up to the voters?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I mean, absolutely, we are responsible. Everyone is responsible for their own behavior. And we do have public meetings almost every Wednesday. So we are in very forward facing. So I think, when I called for that particular counselor to step down, I do believe that that behavior was unbecoming of a counselor. We are held to higher standards as an educator, as a mom, and now as an elected official. I do feel that the public are looking to us as leaders of the city. We have I take my job very responsibly and know the enormous power we have. So to be unethical or to be interfering in elections, the very we get voted in, to me, puts into question the ability to lead in the way that the city deserves. This is a great city, and the residents deserve the representation that they can trust. So I do stand by them. And I also, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I wasn't sure if the minute was up, but just on the overall topic, I know that oftentimes the behavior of the council is talked about in the public a lot, but I do believe that we can only be responsible for our own behavior. But if the 13 of us did work more collegially together, there is definitely more we could push through.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Louijeune, you stepped in at the end of the redistricting process, and when everything wrapped up, having led the end of that final stage of that process, which was particularly rancorous, did you come out of it with any lessons about how you and your colleagues can avoid a repeat of that kind of rancor should that come up again?
Thank you. I led the process because my colleagues had confidence in me to lead the process. And so I thank them for giving me the opportunity. Yes, it was a difficult process. Redistricting is perhaps the most contentious thing that a body has to do. And the fact that we were able to do it and the council have a council vote of 10-2, which is really, rarely have we been able to vote with anything in such a super majority. I'm proud of that, working what we were able to conclude. Now, we definitely need more collegiality. We need less making sure that we come to work and are ready to respond to constituent services, the small things, so that we got to do the small things right, so that people can trust us with the bigger things. And so I'm focused every day on the work. And I know that, colleagues, we can press the reset button and do that, come to work with integrity and lead with heart. That's what this work requires. And that's what I try to do every day. And I know that my colleagues, we can work together to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Henry, you were quoted as saying that you think that the last couple of years have been chaotic. It's been a chaotic 2 years, and that some of it has been embarrassing. Can you talk about how you would help improve the reputation of the City Council if you get elected in the fall?
Yes, no, thank you for the question. And, I think as someone who, I really started, I worked for the council. So I, was with district councilor for District 8, Kenzie Bogg as the director of operations and Mission Hill and Fenway liaison. And during my time there was a group of city councils that really carried themselves really well and really had the, collaborated very well. And I think I saw that firsthand. Really having been working in the administration the last year and a half, I haven't seen the the councilors that we have in there right now. It has been at times embarrassing, and I bring a perspective of someone who has a track record of working with people. When I was working in the administration, I led efforts like the Love Your Block program. I led efforts like the City Hop to Go truck program. And I had every single councilor was invited to participate, and including all the 3 incumbents sitting on this.
Thank you, Henry. Appreciate it. So for the timer situation, we have now somebody stepping in to mute after that minute mark. So if you see that mute notification, that's why that's happening. But Henry, thank you for your answer. Clifton, you were also quoted as saying that you don't like the climate that you're seeing in the political realm. What do you think the main problems are? And how do you think that you will contribute to a better environment in City Hall?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. The reason why I put my hat in the arena over a year ago, I'm very close to my community. And when you can hear from West Roxbury through Mattapan, Dorchester, all the way to Charlestown and the different areas that I've worked in for decades, and they asked me to step up and run because I come from discipline. I come from playing football, organized sports. I worked in the music field. I've been a director. I worked at Epic Records. I mean, you name it. I've formulated a lot of community groups, and it's about leadership and putting your ego to the side, because at the end of the day, we work for the constituents of this community, this great city of Boston, and the bottom line is working together. And I have a great relationship with everybody that's on this call right now, and I would continue to grow. Being a rookie candidate and being a rookie counselor, I would sit there and want to learn and build together as one, because unity is the only thing that I know. That's how I've been able to achieve where I'm at now in life, because I had great leadership through sports, great.
Thank you, Clifton. Bridget, I want to turn to you. You've also talked about the disagreements at City Hall. You mentioned that there's a lot of arguing and finger pointing going on, and you said that there needs to be an adult in the room. What do you have to tell voters to convince them that you can be that adult in the room? What do you think makes you different from the counselors that are currently there? How can you help the environment over at City Hall? Bridget, are you there? We can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Oh, all right. As the youngest of 6 and somebody that also grew up playing a lot of sports, as the first female in a room with the executive board of about 18 men for the past 5 years, I've learned to use my voice and project my voice in the most professional manner. You have to listen to each person and just be level-headed. There's a difference between passion and aggression and anger. And as a city councilor, you need to be professional. You have to have transparency. You have to be accountability. The city council these days, I feel like they think they're infallible, and that needs to change, because you can't accomplish anything as a city for our community if everyone's not working together. You're all in the room for the same page for the common good.
Thank you, Bridget. Moving on, I want to talk about Center Street in West Roxbury and public transit more broadly. Starting with Center Street, Councilor Murphy, you've come out against the plans to redesign Center Street. Can you explain why you think the road diet that's on the table is a bad idea, and if you think Center Street should just stay the same?
Thank you for that. And I was very vocal and put a statement out about I was against the process and the feeling like it's true in Center Street, but as an at-large councilor, I know it's happening. Mattapan, we had a meeting this morning with the State Street residents around State Street and the bike lanes with concerns that the city and the transportation department is moving forward without listening to the voices of the people. Absolutely agree that Center Street needs to address the safety concerns. I unfortunately was a witness to the woman who was hit by a car with the sun glare the day when she was hit on Center Street back in 2019. It's a tragedy when anyone feels that they're not safe, pedestrians, bikers, cars getting up and down, first responders, but the businesses and the neighbors are speaking loudly and feeling as though their voices aren't heard. So I'll continue to make sure that things aren't just pushed on to residents. Like many people in JP and other neighborhoods, South Boston, also are feeling like a lot of this transportation.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. I want to open this question up to other candidates as well, if you'd like to share your thoughts on Center Street in particular. If not, you can pass on the question. Henry, what are your thoughts on the road diet on Center Street?
Oh, thank you for the question. I support the efforts of making Center Street, safer for cars, for pedestrians, for bikers. And I'll tell you why. In 2016, my family experienced, the biggest tragedy that we've ever experienced, and my oldest brother, Robert Santana, passing away due to a car accident. And that's left my family and me in a shock, and still something that we think about every day, right? So I want to make sure that those things are preventable in terms of making sure that you know, our pedestrians, our drivers, our pedestrians, they're all safe, and that we need to take as a city that approach. So thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Thanks for sharing. Councillor Louijeune, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share on this issue in particular?
Thank you, Abdallah, for the question. And just Henry, I didn't know that about your brother. So I'm just, my continued condolences. I know that that must be difficult for you and your family. And I think it's obvious from all the answers here that we all value safety. We all value streets where we can ensure that when we're crossing the street, we don't have to be worried about speeding cars, and we don't have to be worried about things that mean that our children don't return to us at night. And it's important that we are building for the future, that we have these multimodal streets. It's important that community is part of those conversations in terms of what the design looks like. And so that's important for us to have that community feedback loop as we build for the future and as we think about what multimodal street looks like. Maybe a bike lane street works, maybe on a side street, but doesn't work on a main street. Those are the conversations that we need to have with community, people who know their community well, and experts in the city, thinking about how we create streets that have room for buses, for cars, for bikes, for pedestrians, because that's.
Thank you, Councillor. Bridget, you mentioned this earlier. Is there something that you would like to add to what Councillor Murphy said? You're on mute. You just briefly unmuted yourself.
Am I unmuted?
There you go.
I'm not good with this. Sorry. I think as a small business owner, I think that could be detrimental to a lot of the small businesses. It's very hard. I mean, especially during the winter months, like people aren't walking the streets, people aren't riding their bikes during the winter months. And as a public safety, like, will the fire truck be able to clear it? Will ambulances be able to clear it in a good amount of time? I think it just needs to be just revamped, repolished. I think we should, have space for everybody. Like Ruthzee said, we need bus lanes, we need bike lanes, we need things. I actually have a scooter, a moped that I get around the city in. I love it because parking gets expensive when you're working in downtown Boston every day. So that's how I fly back and forth from Southie to South Station. And, on leisurely days, I like to ride my bike. So I get it, but we just need to work together.
Thank you, Bridget. Councillor Mejia, is there anything you'd like to add to this topic?
Yes, thank you. I've been really thinking about this whole notion about bringing people together across their differences. And this is one of those examples in where you see a community completely divided in terms of what is the best course of action. And I think when it comes to situations like this, I've seen this also in Mattapan when we were looking at the central bus lanes, and my office created a citywide town hall and included the businesses, the residents, and making sure that everybody was included in that process. And I think that when we're really looking at issues like this is the intentionality about making sure that those folks who are going to live the reality or are doing the work in that space are engaging in the same dialogue instead of fighting with each other. And I think that this is another opportunity that presents itself for us to really do meaningful work, because there's a lot of tension in this city, and it's not just the bikes. There's a lot of also issues of class and how people feel divided about people who are coming into the city. So I think that that's where the opportunity presents itself for us to really build across these differences.
And just to be clear, do you support the road diet as it currently is?
I do not support. I do support the road diet. What I don't support, and I've been struggling with, is the process in which we have gone to get there.
Clifton, do you want to close out any final thoughts on this particular issue?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Change is always difficult for everybody, but it's about safety. It's about listening to the constituents in those areas. A lot of people may not know why we have the partition in the middle in Mattapan through Blue Hill Corridor. I went to Washington Irving Middle School, and one of our Victorias that was going to do very great things in school died. And that's when Mayor Menino, or Flynn before, it was so long ago, put the medium in the middle of the road. We have to really dive in deep and figure out what is accessible for everybody. I've lost a lot of friends due to motorcycle accidents, bike accidents. And once again, Henry, man, you know I'm always there for you. Sorry to hear about that. But we all have lost somebody due to bike accidents and accidents. So we just have to dive deep and make a decision and get it right.
And so do you support the diet?
I support the diet as long as we dive deep into it and make sure it works for all.
Okay, so just moving on, and we're starting to get through this. We don't have that much time left. So let's talk about public transit briefly, just a little bit more. And this is a question for everybody. I want to keep this answer short. I want you all to just list just one thing, one priority for you that you think the city council should take on in the next term to improve transit in Boston. It could be something like, a focus on bus lanes, fare-free transit or fare-free buses, could be bike lanes. It could be advocating for a seat on the MBTA governing board, whatever it is. If you could just mention one transit priority for the city council to take up in the next term. Councilor Mejia, I'll start with you.
So I would love to see more late night transportation. I think there are a lot of third shift workers. And there's also an opportunity to expand on the nightlife here in the city of Boston. And I think nighttime expanding that would be something that I'd like to see.
Thank you. Bridget, one priority. Sorry, Bridget, we still can't hear you.
I got so. All
There
right,
you
can you
are.
hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
I think Boston definitely needs a seat on the MBTA. Just accessibility. I know we have different bus stops in South Boston that just don't have enough buses running. And they're not on time. That's the whole reason I bought the moped. I was late every day.
Thank you, Bridget. Councilor Louijeune, one priority for transit for the city council.
I do think expansion of the free buses is important. Fares are regressive, and they're regressive on working class folks, on Black and Brown communities. So the more money that we are able to have folks can keep in their pocket, the better. So expansion of that, but also shout out to micro mobility. When Bridget was talking about a scooter, I'm a big scooter enthusiast too. And I think micro mobility is an important part of our solution. I always have my scooter with me. So I think that's an important part as well.
Thank you, Councilor. Henry, what's one transit priority for the city council, you think?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna really have to agree with the last two answers. And really Bridget, can get the seat on the board. And really can't make transit free and reliable without having that seat on the board. So that would be my top priority.
Thank you, Henry. Clifton, one transit priority. Sorry, we can't hear you. Could you just try to mute and unmute yourself again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
What I said was only one I get to answer, but this one will answer two in one. Our nightlife needs to increase, so we need 24-hour public service, along with the people who could be working third shifts, but have to decide either they're gonna walk a long distance or pay a cab. So we need to open up. We are a major city. We need to open up 24 hours so we can take care of workers and the nightlife, so you don't have to drive home at 2 o'clock drunk. I spoke about that when we built UMMF about 20 years ago at City Hall, about the opening up that in that way. So definitely 24 hours, night hour life, and people can work.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy, what's one transit priority in your view for the council?
I really like going last because I liked all of the previous answers, but to make a different answer, I would expand the M7 pass, which is the pass we give to our high school students so they can get around on weekends and, evenings, not just during the school day, and maybe expand it to young adults also, because it is expensive to take the T, and always make it more reliable. Everyone who I hear says they would use it more, but it doesn't come on time and they don't want to be late. So the M7 pass is a great one, and to maybe give it to all like summer interns and others. I have many in the office this summer and would love them to have access to that. Some of them don't. So I would expand that for our youth.
Thank you, Counselor. I just want to ask a quick yes or no question of each of you, and that is whether or not you would approve spending more money on fare-free bus programs when those expire. Counselor Louijeune, you already mentioned that that's something that you support, so I take it you're a yes. Clifton, is that a yes? Would you approve more money for fare-free transit?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's a yes.
Thank you. Bridget? No. Henry?
Absolutely, yes.
Got it. Counselor Mejia?
C, and that's a yes in case you need translation.
And Counselor Murphy?
I want to say yes, but I know the current ones are funded through opera funding, and how can we sustain it? So I do have to be fiscally responsible. It's one of the main jobs of our role on the city council. And so to have the conversation about when it's over, where will that money come from? It is not budgeted yet into our operating budget. So to make sure that we can afford it, because I don't want to just make campaign promises that can't be followed through. And if it is coming from something else, to be clear to the residents of the city of Boston, what will be cut if this does continue. But I do think that the results are in, and those who have access to the few free bus lines that are out there has had a very positive impact for those communities. So I would,
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you. So let's turn to education. Counselor Mejia, you've been skeptical of the plan to move the O'Brien School to West Roxbury. You expressed concerns about how it might water down the diversity of the student body. One thing that you said about it was, quote, "It feels like school gentrification and displacement." Can you talk a little bit about those concerns and what path you'd like to see for the O'Brien School?
Yes, and I'm happy that you are using my quote, because as someone who bounced from place to place, I've grown up here in the city of Boston. I never stayed in one school long enough to make friends. I know how difficult it is for young people who are navigating the education system. And I think when it comes to the O'Brien, I am concerned about the move. In order for this to feel right for me, we need to talk about transportation. We also need to think about the start and end time. I don't want young people to feel like they're going to Mecca. It's a long commute. And I also think that there's putting a lot of financial hardships for families who have to make the decision. The Bryant pulls from communities of Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan. And West Roxbury, while it's a part of the city of Boston, it does feel like a hike for a lot of families. So I think that we have an opportunity to really look at how this is going to impact, and making sure that we're centering the students now who are there and the families in this process.
So because we're starting to run low on time, I do want to give other people a chance to respond, but I might not ask each of you here. So I'm just going to ask if anybody would like to weigh in on this issue. Please raise your hand. Clifton, go ahead.
Tradition in our Boston public schools are gone now. I'm a graduate of Umana Tech, and my school no longer exists. And I don't want to see the O'Brien move for that factor of comfortability in our community, and that when someone drives in Roxbury, that they can feel proud to have a great school of tradition still left in our neighborhoods. So I would like for, if they have to build them their own school and stay in our neighborhood, fine. But no, I lost my school and there wasn't a thing I could do. None of our alumni could stop it. And it was a great school. It was science, become a doctor, all those things. And West Roxbury, that side of town, is a dead zone. It's going to be hard to travel. if there's a snowstorm or any bit of snow, bad weather, it's going to be difficult. I just would like the school to remain where it's at, or will be able to put funds together to build a school for them in the heart of Boston.
Thank you, Clifton. Councillor Murphy, I saw, did you put your hand up?
Thank you for the question. I know I've made a formal statement on this. I do feel that we have a history in the city of Boston. When we want to fix one thing, sometimes another school is the cutting block. It happened when we were trying to find ways to expand the Quincy Josiah, and the McKinley School was going to be given to them. So I do believe that Madison Park High needs to have investment, but does that mean at the expense of the O'Brien, where many of the students there have, very close, Dorchester? I know Councilor Mejia mentioned many of the students are in that neighborhood, Dorchester, Roxbury. So my proposal was to move Madison Park out to the current West Roxbury High complex, which has a lot of land around it, add some agricultural tech courses in there also. And the community needs to have a say. I know many times change is hard for people, but in this case, I feel like the O'Brien should stay right where it is. And also making sure that it's also the accountability of the students and families having a say and not feeling like it's just being done to them.
Thank you, Councillor. And finally, Councillor Louijeune, you also raise your hand.
Thank you. I think it's important that we have more citywide schools. So I went to what is a citywide school? I went to Boston Latin School, and for all of the great things and the bad things about exam schools and about Boston Latin School, I will say that the value really is that it pulls students from every neighborhood. And that's true for Latin Academy. We need more citywide schools. It also helps to build a more collaborative city and to build in more compassion. One of the concerns about JDOB going to West Roxbury is, do you lose that citywide feel of the school? I do think that there are measures that the administration and the city are looking at taking in terms of transportation when it comes to the commuter rail. So I think that there are things that we need to consider. Almost 10% of JDOB is coming from East Boston. What does that look like for East Boston students to be trekking to West Roxbury? If we get transportation right, it is a potential solution. But I think that in general, when we're talking about our high schools, we need more citywide schools, and they need to be centrally located. That's why JDOB, BLA, BLS, all in the heart of our.
Thank you, Councillor. Another quick yes or no question on schools. Recently, the state had considered either taking full or partial control of the Boston Public Schools. Should that prospect ever come back up, using your bully pulpit on the city council, is that something that you would support in the future or something that you would oppose? Just looking for a support or oppose. So Henry, let's start with you. Would you support or oppose a state takeover of the BPS?
I would oppose that.
Bridget? Sorry. Oppose? Yes. Councillor Murphy?
I would support it, but please go to my website to read many of the policy and press releases I've written about it. So there's more of an explanation of why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mejia?
And I led the efforts on the opposition when this first came to be, so I will continue to oppose.
Councillor Louijeune?
I testified before DESE in opposition and will continue to oppose.
And finally, Clifton.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would oppose, just like I was at the line with everybody there opposing it. Without a doubt, Boston can handle Boston business.
Thank you. Thank you all for answering. One last question on BPS is some policy ideas that you think would benefit BPS that the city council can help with. So I'm going to go around, or actually, since we're low on time, maybe you all want to volunteer, but if you could raise your hand if you want to talk about a priority for city council when it comes to improving BPS and school outcomes for kids. Councillor Murphy, I'll start with you. You raise your hand.
many things I think we can and should continue to do when we work together. We have a 42% chronic absentee rate in our city of Boston, and that's 74 days absent. So at any given day, over 20,000 students in the city of Boston, our children are not showing up to school. So one thing I would do is really address that as a public health and a public safety crisis in the city and really get our kids to show up. And I think that's the first and number one priority for me
Okay.
to continue.
Can I ask you on that? Because I'm just looking for one priority,
Got it.
but how would you go about improving attendance? What?
Yeah,
what
absolutely. So as an educator myself, it's getting kids in the door. So making sure we're working with more support for families, like what is stopping our children. I know coming out of COVID, we had an increase, but the chronic absenteeism has been around for decades. So I do believe that more after school and before and after school quality programming, sports, athletics, arts, music, mental health support, social services, all of the things that make the day not something that the kids feel like they're not part of. And also quality, right? 91% of our.
Sorry, Counselor, we're over time, but that's really helpful. Thank you. Clifton, you also raised your hand?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, one policy idea to help improve outcomes.
The issue of truancy is big, but we have to dive deep into the situation. Let's see what's going on at the home. I think it's ridiculous that if a student is missing at Boston Public Schools right now, we don't know if they're alive, dead, or left the state. So we have to do a better grip on making sure we know where our children are and what is the consequences and what's going on at home. Is it bullying? Is it parent neglect? Is it they don't like the school? We have to dive deep and talking to the student and meeting with the families.
Thank you, Clifton. And Counselor Mejia, you also raise your hand.
Thank you. As someone who was chronically absent and became the first person in my family to graduate high school after almost being 20, I understand how important chronic absenteeism is, but one of the things that I have been really focusing on is social, emotional, and mental well-being of students. I created a mental health and wellness program alongside a nonprofit organization that it has now been piloting at the Burke. And I think that oftentimes we find ourselves kind of pointing blame, but I think that we need to really focus on solutions and creating opportunities to develop programs that are going to address issues of mental health and wellness. And I also think that we need to do a better job at educating parents and creating opportunities for parents to also see themselves as part of the solution. Oftentimes we're pushing parents to the side. I started my own nonprofit organization dedicated to making sure that parents were front and center and understood their rights. And I think that we need to get back to the basics and creating opportunities for parents to be informed and engaged and at the table.
Thank you, Counselor. That was a perfect minute too. Henry, you raise your hand as well.
Yes, no, thank you. I think my focus is really right on the after school services. I think as someone who's really going to try to be an advocate for public safety, I want to make sure that there's programs that are accessible but also affordable to our families, for our youth after school, and I think that will really also increase our public safety and keep our kids not only engaged but also safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. And finally, Counselor Louijeune, you also raise your hand.
Thank you. I'm just going to repeat something that what I said earlier. I think dignity affirming buildings are so important, that every student has a school that has a library with a librarian, with a gym so that they can play sports. We know that sports help with chronic absenteeism, that we have arts classrooms because arts help with chronic absenteeism, giving our students outlets that maybe they're meant to be a great artist or a great sports player, and we have to make sure that all of our facilities are able to provide that. It's also how we get students back into BPS and deal with the decreasing number of students. If we have buildings that affirm their dignity, that's one way we get them back.
Thank you, Counselor Louijeune. Moving on to one of the most important issues to a lot of Boston's residents, almost everybody, is the cost of living is so expensive, particularly when it comes to housing. So I want to ask you all about tenant protections in the city and whether you think there are any, if you could name any tenant protections that you would like to see either adopted that the city does not already have, or that you would like to see strengthened. So Councillor Louijeune, I'll start with you because you mentioned this earlier in the debate, and this was one of your priorities. So what tenant protections would you like to either adopt or strengthen?
Yeah, so I started in my career as an attorney in housing court representing our families facing eviction and foreclosure. I think right to counsel is so incredibly important because there's a power imbalance when you go to housing court. You have a lot of women, especially women of color with children, that are disproportionately discriminated against. Having counsel is an important fact. I still practice and represent constituents when I cannot find them an attorney. In housing court, I think that's incredibly important. There's a bill at the state house level, but beginning to look at what we can do at the city level. And obviously rent stabilization is an important part of the work, and that's a bill that we voted on and put before the State House as well.
Thank you, Councillor. On the issue of right to counsel, can I just ask a follow-up? Have there been any models that you've seen in other cities that you think Boston could implement? New York City, for example, was a place that has a right to counsel. Do you think that the outcomes have been positive?
Yeah, and I do think so. And I think that there are studies when you look at the movement and the advocates who supported right to counsel here on the state level, the economic savings that we get from giving people counsel is enormous. People stay in their homes. We're not having to, the moving costs involved. There are all these other costs that we don't take into consideration when people are displaced. So we realize a savings by ensuring that everyone has a right to an attorney. And, I think Jersey City just passed similar civil right to counsel. And I think that there are definitely models throughout the United States of what it means to provide on the civil side right to counsel that really helps to.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mejia, what are some tenant protections that you would like to either adopt or strengthen for the city of Boston?
Yeah, I just want to second my colleagues' comments, ditto, agree on all of those. But I would also just like to uplift the fact that, when I started working on the council, we were doing a lot of work around citywide organizing, and we learned that there's really no standards around Bill of Rights for renters. Like, you do certain things in Austin and Brighton that are different than the way you do business in East Boston. So I think that we need to, as a city, really come up with a standard when it comes to all renters. I'm also curious to see, and I would love to explore how we fight to reduce the cost of the first, last, and security deposits that a lot of these folks are charging people. And I think that there's an opportunity there when we're thinking about low income folks in particular who have to come up with 3.5 months rent just to be able to move. With that amount of dollars, you can potentially even be able to put down a payment on a studio apartment, not an apartment, like a little closet in the city of Boston. So I think that there's some work that we could be doing in terms of leasing as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Bridget, what are some tenant protections that you'd like to see expanded or adopted? Sorry, Bridget, you're on mute again. Maybe if you try muting and unmuting yourself again. Sorry about that. Still can't hear you. I'm sorry. We'll try to come back to you at the end. Sorry about that.
That's because I'm the one that's being unmuted. So I just want to make sure.
Oh, thank you. But Bridget, can you try again? See if we. No, I'm sorry about that. I don't know why we can't hear you. Hopefully we can figure that out. Henry, let me ask you, what are some tenant protections that you'd want to see the city of Boston adopt or expand?
Yeah, I think this is very important and something that it's a priority of mine as I'm running this campaign. We really must ensure that renters are I think like Councillor Louijeune said, not subject to unfair eviction and discrimination and harassment, and they're also supplied with resources to really address some of the issues that may arise day to day, year to year. I think I support rent stabilization laws as a product of public housing, and I already said that I want to be able to make sure that people and residents and families are not only able to stay here, but really thrive here in the city of Boston. And as a product of public housing, I want to make sure that not only that we create new units, but we focus on the units that we currently have and really make upgrades and investments in our infrastructure and our public housing.
Thank you, Henry. Councillor Murphy, any tenant protections you'd like to adopt or expand? See the city of Boston adopt or expand?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm a renter and know that the cost of living in the city of Boston is so expensive. One thing I think is important is that we educate the residents, because many times we get calls or many people we find out didn't even know they had rights. So I do feel it's our job on the council. One of the things I try to do is make sure when we're talking to people that they understand their rights and who they can reach out to. And that's the role also of making those relationships with people in the housing department. One thing that's important also, and something we advocating we can do on the council, is make sure that the Boston residency program, which I do agree that city jobs should be for city residents, but we need to make sure that we're giving them a livable wage. Our municipal police are one that everyone on the council came together to really make sure we were raising their pay, because they're forced to live in the city, but they're making, you know, $18, $19 an hour. So to make sure that we're paying people in the city a wage that they can afford to stay here, so that we're not forced to have so many people feeling as though they have to leave or can't keep up with their rent and then need these supports.
Thank you, Councillor. Clifton, do you have, what are some tenant protections that you'd like to see expanded or adopted?
Well, looking from the outside in, you know, the homeroom petition that passed from the city, we just need to get our colleagues at the state level to dive on in, and we would have to use the bully pulpit collectively and vote out people that are not helping. Bottom line, it's scary for our elders who've owned homes. It's scary for elders who are renters. And if you don't have, if you don't get the knowledge or the education how to protect yourself, you're lost. So I think that's upon the council and outside groups within Boston to get the tenants aware of what their rights are, get our elders aware of what their rights are, because it's unfair if you work your tail off and you can't even remain in Boston, or you lose your home because you got older. So we have to really look at this housing crisis and really dive deep in. No more talking about it, dive into the meat and the potatoes, because it affects us all. When you have
Thank you, Clifton. We're going to have to stop you right there. Appreciate it. But I just wanted to ask if you're all on camera, except for, I guess, Councillor Murphy, but maybe if you could raise your hand if you agree with the rent stabilization policy, that you support rent stabilization, should the state house legalize it for Boston. So I see that Henry, Councillor Louijeune supports it. Clifton, Councillor Mejia, so you support or oppose support? Councillor Murphy, yes or no? No. And Bridget, you're a no too. Councillor Murphy, can I ask why you oppose rent stabilization?
It's failed in the past, and I think we have many other tools in our toolbox to use before we're forcing landlords to adjust rent. And I know when this came through, many landlords already do a good job. We definitely have some that raise their rent too high, but we have many landlords that are keeping it at or below market rate already, and in fear of this coming, are raising the rent. So I do believe that there's other ways, and it's been shown in the past to not work.
So can I ask, when you mentioned the past, that it doesn't work in the past, the proposal that's been out there is not the same as the rent control that was in.
It's not. And in many people feel it was very watered down too, right? That the amount that you could increase is way more than most of the advocates were really wanting. But I think once we start telling landlords how much they can and cannot, I think it just goes down a slippery slope. I think there are other ways to support renters in the city of Boston, and I'll continue to advocate for that. And one is building more affordable housing units. We need more stock. And if we keep building, you know, one bedroom or studio with expensive condos or apartments that are just for rent and not home ownership, that we're going to continue to have this problem.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mejia, you raised your hand. Can you talk about why you support rent stabilization? Or if there's anything that you'd like to respond to anything Councillor Murphy said.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just make sure that you got me on the record that I support rent stabilization. You know, I talk about the fact that I was displaced growing up here in the city of Boston, and that is an issue that I continue to see. And it is one of the tools that could be in our kit as we continue to grapple with this issue. What I have seen, though, is that a lot of people are moving to Randolph, Stoughton, and we are creating financial hardships because those folks still need to commute back to Boston here and to work. My office filed a hearing order on looking at the housing crisis for municipal employees. And I think that rent stabilization could not only keep us here, but this is the right path and towards making sure that we're able to also close that wealth gap.
Thank you. So just one more housing question, and we're coming up on time. We're coming up on time at 8 o'clock. I heard from Jonathan that he's willing to go over for 10 minutes. Is that okay with everybody if we just go over, since we started a little bit late? We won't keep you too long, just 10 minutes, so we can get through just a couple more questions. We talked about tenants' rights. When it comes to housing, though, everybody talks about affordable housing. I just want to hear one policy proposal that you suggest that you actually think will help bring down the cost of rents and housing in the city of Boston. Councilor Murphy, since you mentioned that as an alternative to rent stabilization, what's one policy proposal that you think would bring down the cost of housing in Boston or make it more affordable?
Thank you. Now I'm unmuted. Build. We have to build more housing, and I think that will definitely help us.
So can I ask in particular, though,
yeah, sure.
build, I think that's a good idea, but how do you get people to build? How do you get more housing to be built?
Right. So I think also there's a fear, and when you look at the number of buildings that are going up, we're way down from the past since this administration. So we have to be working with developers in the planning department to see how we can push through projects and put pressure on increasing the IDP and more affordable units in multiple, buildings that are building with multiple apartment units. So to make sure our 2-3 bedroom units. So increase the IDP and help move through development. I'm hearing time and time again that people are building, in Quincy, they're going to Cambridge, they're leaving the city because it's been hard these last couple of years to get permits, and they're holding on to property that they can't afford. So they're not able to make a profit and put in more affordable housing units. So we have to definitely streamline this process, and developers are afraid, and you're hearing that across the board. So we really have to do that.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Louijeune, one policy idea that you think outside of tenant protections can help make the city more affordable, city housing?
Well, I already talked about how deeply I care about the acquisition opportunity program, which helps to prevent displacement. You really do just gotta target speculation and target what's happening at the market. So you really gotta, I think one of the reforms is really looking at the zoning code and reform some zoning to make it easier to build transit-oriented housing, to build housing that is multifamily, where we traditionally don't have multifamily housing. So I think a lot of the work, although it's not like the attractive work, but the real meat and potatoes is in our zoning code to make it easier to build. And then there are things that we can do when we look at our institutions, require them to build more dormitories so that a lot of the multifamily housing that students are taking up can actually revert back to families, because in the institutional master plans, we require institutions, colleges and universities to build dorms, which will free up housing for our families. So that's a multi-pronged answer, but.
Thank you, appreciate it. Clifton, one policy idea that you think will help make housing more affordable?
Some type of tax break for homeowners when they keep the rent affordable for the tenants. When you own a home, it's going to be hard if everything else is going up. So there should be some type of tax break on that end, and just a little bit more education and protection for renters. We're all in the game. We understand what's going on, but a lot of people, it has not transferred to the community. So a lot of people are leaving on a fake eviction. They don't know how to stand up for themselves. So I think, and also they should not be walking into housing court by themselves. There should be some real representation for someone to fight for where they're living. Because at the end of the day, if you don't own the home and someone wants you to leave, you're gonna have to leave. But that doesn't mean you should be displaced and going through the things Julia went through when she was younger, because that's happening to everybody this day, right now, in this new millennium, okay?
Thank you, Clifton. Bridget, one policy proposal to make housing more affordable outside of tenant protections.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I'm sorry for all the trouble with the microphones.
Okay, that's all right. Geez, I'm all over the place now. I think we do need to build. There are negotiations with all these developers and contractors that I feel like aren't really, the city's not holding their feet to the fire with all these buildings that are going up. There should be more affordable housing being built to offset that. But we also have to stop paying people more. People need to be able to live in the city. I mean, I'm a union iron worker. I make a decent amount of money and I still live paycheck by paycheck. I have myself, my mother, and 2 kids to support. It's still a struggle. I think we need to up the pay and
Are you talking
hold
about upping the pay
all-
for city workers, upping the pay for city workers and
for like minimum wage, just everyone in general, union workers, everybody. We need to raise the cost of living has raised. We need to raise the pay.
thank you. Henry, one policy idea that you think would make housing more affordable in Boston.
Yeah, so I think, I agree, Councilor Louijeune, on the fact that, as someone, I grew up in Mission Hill, and we're surrounded by many colleges, and although they're really part of the community, I think we need to really work with colleges to ensure that they're providing more on-campus housing and freeing up those housing for our families. I think we also must really take a focus on leveraging public and private land to increase the supply of affordable housing. Boston should really invest in a range of housing models, which should include a social cooperative housing, as well as like low threshold housing options for residents experiencing homelessness. So, those are the two, the 2 focuses that I'll have if elected. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. I was like, oh my God, don't forget about me.
No, I have not forgotten.
Okay, so I think that there are a number of things that we could do. I'd love to see a little bit more of sharing space. I see a lot of young people who are aging out of foster care, and I see a lot of elders who have homes that they can open up. So I think that there's an opportunity to create more intentional housing living that helps support both our elders and young people. So I'd love to see some more of that. There's an organization called Tree Life, I believe. I went to visit in Western Mass, and it was a community that was created, a very intentional community to help support people. So I'd love to see that. And I also think, I've been a little bit aggressive around the IDP. Right now, I pushed for 50% for the IDP, and I'd love to see us really leaning into that a little bit more so that we can really meet the moment. And while I do appreciate this whole idea of building, I really want us to build with intentionality and making sure that we're redefining what affordable means, because
Thank you, Councilor. So I just have 2 more questions that I'm going to get through real quick. And we might not get a chance to go to everybody, but I want to talk about Mass and Cass. Councilor Murphy, you mentioned in the past that you supported forcing people into treatment. Is that something that you still support, and can you explain why you think that's the right approach to opioid addictions, and particularly in the context of Mass and Cass?
And I wouldn't call it forcing. I guess depends on the words you want to use, but definitely Section 35 and many people that are down at Mass and Cass are not in a place to make the right decisions for themselves. I'm a strong advocate for those in recovery. Have a long history of supporting with the Gavin Foundation and others, making sure that people find their way to recovery. Many of those suffering down there are not ready or in a place yet and are in very harmful positions. Many women are being raped, sexually assaulted, and drug dealing going on. So I do think that when families know that they want to help their loved ones and help support them to detox or recovery, that option should be on the table. I do not in any way think it's the only option on the table, but also drug court and others where then you're in front of a judge and you're in front of the social workers and the recovery workers. And if it is the time, because many times it may take 1, 2, 10, 20 times to find your way and be successful.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Louijeune, you had previously disagreed and opposed what your colleague Counselor Murphy just said. Counselor Mejia, you as well, disagree. So I wanted to just ask you both, why do you think that involuntary commitment is a bad idea? So starting with Counselor Mejia.
I think that for me, it's really about leading with empathy and compassion. And I think that anything that is forced upon you feels a bit disempowering. And I think that what this moment really requires is to really think about how we can help support people and not mandate them. And I think that for me is something that I really struggle with as someone who lost a cousin to a heroin overdose. I know what a difference it could have made in his life had he had the right supports in place, but I don't think that sanctioning anyone is the pathway towards dealing with the opioid crisis here in the city of Boston. I think that it is one of those things that I feel is done to them without them really being able to speak for themselves. So I find that to be somewhat punitive and abusive, and it's just definitely not the type of compassion that I like to see from the city.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Louijeune, is there anything that you wanted to add to that, or did that cover? Go ahead.
Thank you. I think all policy really should be data-driven. When you look at the data of folks and whether they're actually able to recover or whether there are relapses, forced commitment, when you look at the data, there's data that shows that it leads to actually more relapses because people are forced into treatment beyond their will. And so I do not believe in increasing the ability of Section 30, the use of Section 35. I'm not, there are a minority and instances in which really the person's a harm often to themselves that says that it can be on the books, but increasing the usage of it is something that we should really be wary of. That's really the biggest thing you can do is restrict someone's liberty. And because the data shows that it's not a good way to bring people to recovery, it's actually the opposite. We should steer clear of it as much as we can.
All right, so we are coming up on time now. We are over time, actually. So I just want to ask if a show of hands, raise your hand if you support the idea of legalizing supervised injection sites in Boston. If you support it, raise your hand. If you don't, give me a thumbs down. So that's Clifton, yes. Counselor Louijeune, yes. Henry, yes. Counselor Mejia, yes. And Counselor Murphy and Bridget, you guys are no, you don't support safe injection. Okay. And one last yes or no question. Just with budgeting, we didn't get a chance to talk about a lot of things. We didn't get a chance to talk about policing. We didn't get a chance to talk about the environment. But just with policing, in the issue of allocating budgets, a show of hands, who supports reallocating police funds, decreasing the police budget, and using those funds elsewhere in the city? If anybody believes that the police budget should be decreased, can you give me can you raise your hand?
That's a weird question.
Simple. Do you think that the police budget ought to be what it is? Do you think it should be less? Is that still confusing, Counselor Mejia?
I very good paraphrasing. I totally get it. English is my second language, and I do appreciate you paraphrasing it in that way. Thank you.
Paraphrasing
your explanation, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So you think that police budget should be less than what it is?
I think what we need to do is so that I'm clear, what I'm answering is I do believe that we need to reallocate resources from the police budget to support the social, emotional, and mental and housing well-being of our citizens.
Thank you. Counselor Louijeune, did you have something to say, or were you just raising your hand in support of that idea?
I think that I think saying it just like that is not the full sentence. I think there's a sentence where we're talking about the work of prevention and what prevention looks like. Too often we allocate the work of prevention to police departments when they're reactionary. The work of prevention really happens in communities and really happens in nonprofits. So a lot of the money that we are misguidingly sometimes using for prevention happens and should be led by our communities. And that's where the money should really sit.
Okay. All right. So did anybody else want to weigh in on that before we close it out? No. All right. I'm going to pass it over to Bob to close us out. But before I do, I just want to thank each of the candidates for spending the time with us tonight and sharing your thoughts and ideas for the city of Boston. Your constituents, I am sure, appreciate it. I hope people turn out and vote in this election. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking my questions. And thanks to the wards 4, 5, and 10 committees, Democratic committees, for hosting this event and inviting me.
Hi, I'm Bob Binney, Chair for Ward 5. And I would like to, first of all, thank Abdallah for this magnificent job of moderating. He absolutely brought the conversation out for everyone. I think we all got an understanding of where all of the 6 candidates stand, and it was just terrific. You know, we live in a rarefied part of the world here in Boston and in Massachusetts, and compared to other parts of the country, it's really quite unique. And I think we witnessed it tonight with these 6 magnificent candidates. Their talents and their experience, it just came out. And I just want to thank you so much for joining in the conversation and allowing yourselves to be exposed, I guess, to the attendees. And it was just a wonderful event. So thank you so much to the 6 of you. Also, finally, I'd like to thank the attendees. I see that we're down a few numbers, so people are breaking to have dinner maybe, but there's still a good sizable number here. So thank you for staying on and listening. That's so much appreciated by the 6 candidates. They put their name out here tonight, so that's for sure. And with that, please, those attendees that are still listening, do not forget to vote. We are voting on November 7th this year, and the general election, the early election starts on October 28th through November 3rd. So please, please, please get out to vote. That's the most important thing. So with that, it's a privilege to be a part of this with the other 2 wards. I will say that one of the wards carried a majority of the workload here. Ward 4 is just a terrific group of people, and they had Ward 10 and Ward 5 support. So thank you and have a wonderful evening. Take care.
I just want to make sure
Really, I
everybody,
asked
it's
a question.
September the 12th. The election. Is it September 12th?
It's the election.